And I intend to bring Democrats and Republicans together to finally pass universal health care and cut the cost of a typical family's premiums by up to $2,500 per family per year, because it is time that every American had the kind of health care that I have as a member of Congress. And when I talk about how we can do all this and make a real difference in the lives of working families, I want you to know that this is not just political rhetoric. It's the cause of my life. You see, I haven't spent my career in the halls of Washington. And some of the steel workers here may be interested that I now live in Chicago. I didn't originally grow up in Chicago. I moved to Chicago after college because I wanted to work at the grassroots level to make life a little better for working families. And back in the early and mid-'80s was the time when the steel plants in Chicago had all closed. And tens of thousands of people had been laid off of work. And so a group of churches got together to try to help the unions there and the community organizations and neighborhood groups there to try to get that community back on its feet. And for 3 years, I worked as a community organizer, helping folks who had lost their jobs at the steel plants try to figure out how they could find new work that paid a decent wage. I know what it's like. I have seen the costs of bad policy and neglect from Washington on neighborhoods and on families. That's how I got involved in public service. And whenever I think about why I got into politics, it's the voices of those men and women and those children that I first heard so many years ago, and I keep on hearing. And those are the voices that I carried with me to the Illinois Senate, where I brought Democrats and Republicans together to expand health insurance for 150,000 children and parents, where I led tax breaks of $100 million for working families who really need them. Those are the voices I carried with me to Washington, where the first bill I introduced was to make college more affordable, where I fought against a bankruptcy bill that made it harder for families to climb out of debt, and where I passed the most sweeping lobbying reform in a generation. Ethics reforms that made sure that lobbyists couldn't give gifts and meals and lend corporate jets to members of Congress, so they would actually be accountable to you as opposed to special interests in Washington. And those are the voices that I intend to carry with me to the White House if you're willing to work with me and fight with me. If you're willing to stop settling for what the cynics tell you you have to accept and reach for what we know is possible, which is a government that is working on behalf of the American people. So we all know that the challenges we face are great and growing by the day. But what we have to remember is that as challenging as these times are, we've seen harder times before. I think of a young couple in Kansas who came of age in the Great Depression. My grandparents. My grandfather fought in Patton's army in Europe. My grandmother stayed home working on a bomber assembly line even though she had a kid to look after. And not only did they defeat fascism, but they lifted themselves up out of a Great Depression. In that hour of peril, the greatest generation stood together and overcame impossible odds to save the world for freedom's cause. That was their generation's moment. And this is our moment. This is our moment to choose change over more of the same, to choose the future over the past. This is our moment to finally turn the page on the failed politics of yesterday. This is our moment to put the American dream within reach for every American. And I hope that if all of you stand up with me on April 22nd and vote for me, that we won't just win Pennsylvania, but we will win this nomination. We will win the general election, and then you and I together hopefully can change the country and change the world in the process. So thank you very much, everybody. I appreciate it. Now, thank you. Well, you guys don't need